So St. Virginia Centurion, 16th century. She dedicated her time to prayer and charity. St. Mary de Rosa, 17th century. She cared for the sick and she cared for the poor. St. Paul the Tros, 10th century. He had a reputation of holiness that others were drawn to. St. Ubiquitous, 9th century, dedicated his life to prayer. St. Christiana, the slave, 4th century. In the face of death, she refused to give up her faith, martyred. St. Maximinus of Mysi, the 6th century, he dedicated his life to prayer. St. Valerian of Abenza lived in the 4th century, martyred for his faith. St. Margaret of Fontana lived in the 15th century, devoted to caring for the sick and the poor. St. Eldebero of Metz lived in the 10th century, dedicated his life to building the faith. St. Sylvia of Constantinople, 4th century, fought for the truth of faith. St. Opha of Essex lived in the 8th century, gave up royalty in order to serve God. And then the martyrs of Rome in the 3rd century, 22 Christians gave up their life in the persecutions of Valerian. What do you think they all have in common? Today happens to be their feast day. One of my favorite things to do in the morning time when I open up my phone and I look at my liturgy, the hours, sometimes I open up the book, but I like technology, Father. I use my phone. But in the app that I have my liturgy, the hours in, it also has Lives of the Saints. And I love to just kind of go through each day and read many of the lives of the saints. And just to kind of begin to understand what made them tick. What was at the heart of who they were? And what's interesting is when you look at this, what they have in common is today is their feast day. But what they have in common is they didn't give lip service to God. God asked them to do something, they did it. They were focused on saying to themselves, I'm going to follow God, and I'm going to give my whole heart, my whole soul, my mind, everything to Him. And that's what made them holy. Now, I'm sure somewhere along the line, there might have been a conversion. You know, not all of them lived that righteous path right from the beginning. You know, many lived a life that was not so righteous, but then were drawn to God in a very special way. But they all at one point heard the call and said, this is what my life is going to be about. Now, they were no different than you and I. They weren't. And I think sometimes we take the saints and we put them so high on a pedestal, we think, well, we're never going to be like them because they have a special grace or a special holiness about them. But if you begin to read the lives of the saints, you begin to realize that they came from lives not much different than mine or yours. Now, this gospel today is a beautiful parable. Jesus is so good about giving a parable and trying to bring a point across to those who are there listening to him. And what does he do? He talks about these two sons. You know, sort of apropos, because I have my two sons sitting in the back there, you know. And I could almost pick on them right now, and I might, okay? But Jesus tells a story about a man who had two sons. And he tells the first one to do something, and what happens? They say, sure. No, right away he says what? I will not. But later, kind of thinks about what his dad asked him to do, and he ends up doing it. And then you've got the second son, who said right away, I'll do it. The dad asked him to do something, and he says, I'll do it. Are you thinking about that right now, Luke? Because you know I asked him to do something today. When I got home today, it wasn't done. So he was scratching his head. And I thought about this gospel right away. But in that story, all right, when he says, I'll do it, yeah, no problem, he doesn't do it. That's paying lip service. That's saying, you're going to do it, and then you just don't even really care about doing it. You figure, well, if I just say I'm going to do it, it's okay. That's not what we should be about when it comes to our faith, when it comes to responding to our God. I know it's not always easy because things get in the way. But when our God asks us to do something, we should move forward and say, how am I going to accomplish this today? How am I going to serve you today? Because every day he does say, please do this for me. Go out into the vineyard and work. Go out into the world and work. Go out into the world and bring the good news. Go out in the world and serve another. Go out in the world and make a difference in another person's life. It's real easy just to say, yay, God, I will. But what he's asking us to do is just to go and do it. You want to learn how it's done? Read about some of these beautiful lives that were no different than you or I, and how they each day just picked up and said, okay, and they did it. It wasn't just lip service. Like I said, I know that's not always easy because things get in the way, like video games. You know where that's going, right? But sometimes we have to step back and we say, okay, I didn't do it right away, but now I'm going to. I'm going to push a little bit harder because this is what God asks of me today. So which son are you? Are you just paying lip service today? Or are you stepping back and realizing that I need to do this? I need to do what God asks of me. I need to do this today.